In the 1989 James Bond film, the last film of Timothy Dalton era, Q displays a custom-built rifle disguised as a camera. Take a look.
Now this looks like an ordinary camera, doesn't it? Now, this is a signature gun. Now, nobody can use the gun but you.
So we'll come back to that and how that factors into this presentation. During my years of film school, probably the most influential film of that period, although I didn't know it at that time, was Abraham Zapruder's Zapruder Film. Now, it wasn't part of any curriculum. Of course, Zapruder's 26-second account of the Dealey Plaza assassination of the president gets the full-blown treatment in the Stone film, completely blown up, and the centerpiece of the finale of that film as it factors in to Jim Garrison's trial on Clay Shaw. That was about the extent of what I knew about this. If there was a man shooting on 8 millimeter in the plaza, capturing this awful moment. But as my understanding of November 22nd and what transpired in Dealey Plaza deepened, the more questions I had about what exactly we were seeing in this film. It began to raise more questions than answers. Its mysteries were incomplete. Even grasping its chain of custody proved to be problematic. Oftentimes, it's referred to as a time clock reference to say how many seconds transpired between shots. And as the decades have gone on, folks have actually published and come out and questioned whether what we're even seeing in the Zapruder film is authentic, is what was shot on that 8 millimeter film in November of 63. An example is James Fetzer's edited book, The Great Zapruder Film Hoax, which argues the intentional doctoring of the Zapruder film was done because it needed to show visually the lone gunman theory that the president was shot from behind. Of course, one of the most shocking, I mean, the most shocking moment of that film and in any film really is frame 313. That blood burst is only 1 frame length. And it's hard, of course, to pull your eyes away from that in some ways. I mean, even Zapruder himself, I believe, watched that film at least 15 times that weekend. Um, the moment as it's shown to us, as it's come down to us, the moment of impact, and you see that flash of blood burst and the flap of skin, kind of the world changed in that moment. But anyway, what's interesting though is that what we see in the Zapruder film of the impact of the bullets, the fatal bullet shot to the president, is in contrast to what the Parkland Hospital doctors describe JFK's head wound as being the blown out portion of his skull in the back of the head, not in the front, as it's shown in the film. Abraham Zapruder, 1905 to 1970, had been living in Dallas since 1941. He arrived from New York. He was a pattern maker for the garment company Nardis. He co-founded the women's apparel company Jennifer Juniors, the offices of which were located directly across the street from the Texas School Book Depository. That address was 501 Elm Street. Zapruder reportedly at first did not bring his Bell and Howell spring-wound camera and 8 millimeter Kodachrome film with him to work on November 22nd because of the early morning rain in Dallas. He was persuaded to do so by coworkers. In Dealey Plaza, he chose a location after kind of looking around, and he settled on the concrete abutment. He stood up, apparently had vertigo, so he had a female coworker steady him. for fear of falling. So the shooting happens, and Zapruder, according to his testimony, is kind of screaming, "They killed him! They killed him! They killed him!" as he's stumbling back to the Deltex building. He encounters local newsman Harry McCormick. Harry McCormick connects Zapruder to Forrest Sorrells, who's head of the Dallas Secret Service office. McCormick, Sorrells, and Zapruder set out to have the film developed. It was developed at Eastman Kodak in Dallas. And for copies to be made, it was taken to Jameson Film Company and then back to Kodak for more development. So by the end of the night on November 22nd, four prints existed. Sorrells took two copies, Zapruder kept a copy and the original. Right. According to a January 1964 affidavit from Sorrells, this is a quote from Sorrells. Mr. Zapruder agreed to furnish me with a copy of this film with the understanding that it was strictly for official use of the Secret Service and that it would not be shown or given to any newspapers or magazines, as he expected to sell the film for as high a price as he could get it. Reporter R.B. Stoley of Life arrived at Zapruder's office on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. ahead of the 9 o'clock planned sort of media screening of the film for the press. That was planned, that he would get there early, that he would kind of get his foot in the door before anybody else did. Now, Stoley's boss at Life was C.D. Jackson, who was a veteran intelligence man. He worked in the Eisenhower administration. He pushed for the media company, Life, to first make an offer of $50,000 for print rights only and for 1 week only. Stoley and Life then sent the film by airplane to its Chicago offices on Saturday afternoon, where the original supposedly was for the rest of the weekend. Or so it seems. More on that later. Then something happened. Life reapproached Zapruder about the sales contract, making a second offer to buy out all motion picture rights of the film from Abraham Zapruder. They succeeded, walking away with it on the day of the president's funeral, that Monday, November 25th. They paid Zapruder they paid Zapruder $150,000 at $25,000 per year for 6 years, the equivalent of about $1.5 million today. Zapruder donated the first $25,000 to the widow of Officer J.D. Tippit, who was killed allegedly by Lee Oswald shortly after the hit on the president. Just days later, so for the November 29th issue of Life, 30 black and white still frames of the Zapruder film were published in the magazine. So this is definitely things are definitely moving quickly here. So in that publication of Life featuring frames from the Zapruder film, Life supposedly mistakenly rearranged the sequence of frames so as to make the president's head appear to snap forward and not the kind of well-known back and to the left. Or a December 1963 Life article by Paul Mandel mentions how JFK can be seen on film looking back toward the book depository when he's shot in the throat, or that both Zapruder and his female co-worker who was on the abutment with him claimed Zapruder was already filming when the motorcade turned onto Elm. Remember, there's that cut. We are seeing the approaching motorcade, and then there's that inexplicable cut, and then the president's motorcade is already moving quickly. So, but we have here that there's testimony from Zapruder and Marilyn Sitzman that Zapruder was recording this whole time. So with those three things happening, the mistakenly rearranged frames, you have Paul Mandel saying JFK looked behind him towards the depository, and that Sitzman and Zapruder say he was continuously filming this whole time, just kind of raises suspicions about this cover story of Life and the involvement. And just it's another example in my mind of this kind of pious fiction that's put toward so many aspects of the JFK case, that everything's on the up and up, when clearly there is just so much more going on underneath. On top of that, the public wasn't shown the Zapruder film as a film for 12 years, nearly 12 years, until thanks to Geraldo Rivera's Good Night America show on ABC. It was March 6, 1975, and Robert Grodin brought the film on the show. Prior to that, it was shown in the Garrison trial, as depicted in the Stone film JFK, um, but it was not shown to the public for almost 12 years. So why? Well, Life was so apparently appalled by the traumatic and violent nature of the film, they locked it away. That so says C.D. Jackson. But why did they originally pay Zapruder for Universal motion picture rights only to suppress it? So once 75 rolls around and it's shown on Geraldo, Goodnight America, Life sells the film rights back to the Zapruder family for $1. The U.S. government took formal ownership of the film as a key assassination record in 1998. And once again, the Zapruder film family was handsomely compensated for that, about $16 million. So let's go back to the weekend of the assassination. What exactly happened to the film when it was sent to Life's offices in Chicago? An apparent second version of the film was actually handled by the CIA at NPIC, that's the National Photographic Interpretation Center in DC, most likely on Sunday night, November 24th. NPIC was launched to focus mainly on aerial and satellite photography for reconnaissance purposes, like a kind of Cold War fixture. And the Zapruder film was brought to NPIC by a Secret Service courier. And all this was determined from interviews by the ARRB in 1997. The courier said the film was original and was developed not in Dallas, but in Rochester, New York, at a place called Hawkeye Works, which is kind of the code for Kodak's research and development lab in Rochester. NPIC's job was to enlarge certain frames 40 times the original 8 millimeter. I mean, 8 millimeter, we're talking like that. 40 times the original 8 millimeter size. Three sets of 4 by 5 color prints, 4 by 5 inch color prints were then produced. Peter Janney interviewed NPIC's photo interpreter in 2009. He was a duty officer in 1963. He told Janney he saw the original 8 millimeter film developed by Kodak. He saw more than one frame depicting the head explosion. Remember, the blood burst is just frame 313. Now, his job then was to produce notes and briefing boards of selected frames for John McCone, who was head of the CIA, and for the Secret Service. The Zapruder film also does not show the presidential limousine driven by William Greer slowing down considerably after shots had already been fired when the fatal headshot happens, which, although slowing down did allow, Clinton Hill to hop on it. I mean, that's maybe the best thing you can say about why that limousine is slowing down. We know this because of footage shot by Orville Nix. No question, slowing down enabled an assassin to lock in his target and fire that fatal shot. Witnesses also mentioned a bullet hole in the presidential car's front shield. It's not visible in the Zapruder film. There is also the conveniently placed Stemmons Freeway sign blocking the crucial shot. So Zapruder, who seemed to be taking how he was going to frame this parade very seriously, settles on an angle that um, has the Stemmons Freeway sign so conspicuously placed. By the time the motorcade comes out, it's amazing. Right before he goes past this sign, and the motorcade disappears for a moment, it's still JFK still in charge, right? He comes out, he's hit. Something sends his arms this way. And also there's figures on the lawn who we know to be like, for instance, Gene Hill, Mary Mormon. They appear as giants, dwarfing that presidential car in the foreground. So for some reason, Zapruder also framed that moving presidential car on the lower third of his frame. That's so close to the bottom. He's dangerously close to cutting off those in the car altogether. Now, we'll give Zapruder here the benefit of the doubt. Look, I was a sideline football videographer in high school. There were times when, you take your eye off the viewfinder and you're kind of watching the action over the camera. And so your camera is drifting a little bit. But for otherwise, Zapruder is amazingly composed during the most shocking event of the century. He keeps rolling. He is as poised as a war photographer. Why wouldn't Zapruder keep filming? I mean, he's able to keep the shot the whole time of the president. The presidential motorcade is the focus of Zapruder's shot the whole time, no matter what transpires in that car, no matter who's hit or who's not. If it was just a normal passing motorcade, it seems to me that Zapruder would never have changed his frame otherwise. But if you know what's happening, and he did seem to know what was happening, he talks about the president's head exploding like a firecracker. Why would you not keep shooting what was happening? That was just the beginning of the motorcade. What if there were other assassins? I mean, you could have taken out the entire line, a good chunk of the entire line of hierarchy of government. I mean, you had the vice president, you had another senator, you had the mayor of Dallas coming up. All of those people could have been being shot at too. What would he know? But he finishes his shot, and then that's the end. So how could such a tiny uh, piece of film be manipulated? The proposed alterations, some researchers have suggested were performed on the Zapruder film, include matte effects and compositing images in order to manipulate the movement and actions of the limo and the occupants inside. Is that possible for 1963? Well, sure. I mean, the long-standing technique uh, was long employed in the early history of film. It's the idea of masking out parts of the film and adding an effect to make your actors appear somewhere else. An example of this distortion is the inhuman movements of William Greer's head swiveling, observing the headshot. And lacking from the Zapruder film, as we know it, is visibility of the extent of the president's tissue being splattered. I mean, we have testimony from Bobby Hargis, who is the motorcycle policeman, talking about getting hit from JFK's blood and flesh, and we don't see that in the Zapruder film. I recommend Noel Twyman's book, Bloody Treason, who really gets into his chapter on the Zapruder film. It really talks about these issues. So, could the Z film, as it has come down to us, have been a recreation and not an alteration? After all, there have been scores of recreations of the kill from Hollywood and from the federal government. Immediately after the Secret Service, the FBI, and then we've had films over the decades recreate the Zapruder film, recreate the assassination as it has appeared in the Zapruder film. Almost always, that is what we're seeing when we see these recreations. It's how it looked in the Zapruder film. All right, so Zapruder's film remains, given what I've just said, it's like the touchdown for how we see the assassination, how we think of it. It dominates all the other images, all the other films and clips taken in Dealey Plaza, including the AP photographer's James Alkin's photographs. If it's a recreation, was it shot sometime immediately after the assassination? Now, that would be too simple an answer, too easy an answer. More disturbing is probably more likely the truth that the film was altered in post, as we say. Zapruder realized that and was torn between whistleblowing on the discrepancies that he clearly saw or just stay quiet. The film ostensibly haunted Zapruder for the remainder of his life. He had nightmares about it. He told the Warren Commission that. And according to his granddaughter, it became a taboo subject in the Zapruder family. And it's like a bizarre world of what happened in Dealey Plaza that day. You have lookalikes and you have suspicious identities just dominating the area. You have Tippett's resemblance to the president. You have the identities of the three tramps. You have my own hypothesis that it wasn't Mac Wallace, if it was Mac Wallace up there in the building, but preacher O.B. Graham. They very much look alike. It was him scurrying away from the scene. You have the Oswald lookalike scrambling away from the grassy knoll down into this Nash Rambler. You have a person who may or may not have been Joseph Miltier watching the motorcade. Boy, Abraham Zapruder himself bears a striking resemblance to one Reverend Theodore Jackman. If you know my work, I have talked about extensively about Jackman. He was cited by Miltier, thanks to Willie Somerset, as being involved in the assassination. Amazingly, Jackman was a filmmaker himself, and we know this from newspaper articles uh, in the 30s and into the 40s. Uh, Ostensibly to go and record biblical sites of the Holy Land. But he was bankrolled by an unknown Hollywood film company. He was given 15,000 feet of film. And by 1940, Jackman, who was a Pentecostal preacher, was a Christian Zionist backed by the Jewish National Fund. So is it possible Jackman knew Zapruder through Dallas-based organizations like the JNF or the Zionist Organization of America? So, returning back to License to Kill, Mary Haverstick, in A Woman I Know, postulated that exact same notion in regards to the Babushka lady and what she was doing looking through her camera when the fatal shot struck. The takeaway, finally, that I submit is that perhaps we should not rely on the Zapruder film so much as a timestamp or as an accurate reference to what exactly transpired at Dealey Plaza. It's quite possible that the further one researches this horrific event, the more one begins to wonder how much of what we know is the truth of what transpired that day.